Hey Fabricators, welcome back to Advancing Fabric, where I am super excited because we're digging into one of my favorite parts of the new Fabric platform, which is called DirectLake. Now that sounds all fancy, but what actually is it? So in a nutshell, whenever we used to use Power BI with any kind of lake-based technology, we'd have to have some kind of server, some kind of compute, something picking the data out of the lake and pushing it into Power BI. But with DirectLake, we don't need to do that anymore. Power BI can now actually understand Delta sat in a lake and just use it directly against the lake. That's why it's called DirectLake. So that is the plan. Today, we're going to have a look at that, how it works, give you a bit of a run through, a bit of a demo, all that good stuff, and get you set up for success with DirectLake. That is the plan. Now, this channel is brought to you by Advancing Analytics. We are your friendly neighborhood engineering, analytics, and AI consultancy. So if you're working with Fabric, you're working with Databricks, you're working with lakes, then do get in touch and we'll help you reach your analytical success. That's the plan. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Ask us below if you've got any comments and questions, or you're trying to get started with Fabric, you want to know what the best thing to do is, just get in touch. That's what we're here for. Now, I am well known for not being a Power BI person. So, in order to actually show us the best of things, we have Johnny, our Power BI analytics engineering aficionado. Welcome.
Hello, Simon. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, it's going good. As you can see, I have ridiculous levels of excitement because DirectLake's cool. Really cool.
DirectLake is definitely one of the most exciting additions in Fabric, without doubt.
So do you want to give us
to know about it?
What is it? What is it? How does it work? Why should anyone care?
What is it? So, historically, from a Power BI perspective, we basically had two ways to connect with the data. You could connect using import mode, which kind of says what it is. You had to basically connect to your data, import that into your Power BI PBIX file. That would then be compressed using the VertiPack engine, and all your queries are basically run against all of that imported data. Being able to use the VertiPack engine means that you got sort of blazing fast performance with your DAX. It'd be nice and snappy and given a really, really good experience. But the downside being that you're going to have to set up refresh schedules. So maybe if you're doing batch processing once a day, once an hour, something like that. So you get the blazing fast queries and performance, but some latency on your data. And then the alternative connection mode is direct query. So that's going directly to the data source. Because of that, you're using that VertiPack engine, you're not getting the compression. Some DAX functions aren't even supported using direct query modes. You end up losing a little bit of functionality there as well. So it also just basically, it depends how well optimized the source data for that's going to be. So the future is DirectLake. So DirectLake is effectively a Fabric feature. And this diagram here effectively explains it. So you are getting here the best of both worlds. You get the blazing fast performance of importing your data, but you don't have to worry about data refreshes and latency. It just connects directly to your lake. Now, the VertiPack engine itself is all about compressed columnar format data. How would you describe Parquet files, Simon?
Parquet files? It's just a compressed columnar format.
There we go. Exactly. And obviously, Delta tables run off Parquet files. So what Microsoft have done is they have adjusted the VertiPack engine to be able to read those Delta tables directly and basically get that best of both worlds situation. So, yep, you get to get that blazing fast performance, but at the same time, don't have to worry about setting up data refreshes and things like that. It is just reading directly from your lake.
Which makes entire sense, right? Because if you got something that's stored in a super well compressed, well organized column store format, and then previously you're pulling it out of that, decompressing it, pulling it over, and then recompressing it to basically the same format, yeah, you can see why people have questions about it. It makes so much sense. But the big question is, people look at that going, okay, so it's not imported, it's not local in memory. How's performance?
Really good, really good. In terms of sort of the benchmarking we've done so far, Jordan's actually written a blog over on the AA website, which is all about benchmarking that performance of import mode versus direct query versus DirectLake. And to be honest, it's not like bang on blazing fast as import. Import ultimately is still the quickest, but the difference is much smaller, to the point where, you know, the pros and cons, you know, it gets to the point now where really it's like DirectLake feels like it should be the de facto mode if you're querying data in Fabric 100%.
Makes a lot of sense. Just adjusting it, we're cutting off the top of your head, and I've brought you fully into frame. Yeah, I mean, so like that, I think that was the people's worry, right? People's worry was that if you're taking this thing going, right, okay, I'm going to save money, I no longer need to have compute sitting in the middle, but then it's just going to be slow. And any kind of dashboard, the moment is just a bit clunky, a little bit slow, it's not worth doing. But yeah, I mean, everything I've seen is actually surprisingly fast.
Yeah, it's really good. Should we take a look at it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have myself here a workspace with a Lakehouse setup. For the time being, at least, DirectLake is only available using Lakehouses. That is just a public preview limitation. The messaging from Microsoft is that it will be available with warehouses, but for the time being, it has to be done via a Lakehouse. This Lakehouse, for the sake of demonstration, has literally been made by shortcutting some data in from another Lakehouse somewhere else in our tenant. Annoyingly, you get the 3 artifacts. I've only created one. It's one Lakehouse, but I get here my Lakehouse main endpoint. And then you see the data set with the default there in the brackets. So where do you think we would go if we want to start interacting with our data set? What do you reckon? Which is the option to pick up?
This testament. Well, I'm going to assume data set.
Yeah, you'd think, wouldn't you? So certainly you can go into the data set and you can start to see a little bit of information about it. We can see things like the dependencies. So there's the fact that I'm shortcutting from a different Lakehouse. We get a picture of all the tables that are here as well. The create paginated report button if you really want to. But in terms of actually being able to manage the data set, you can't do anything from here. So you need to go back to your workspace. My second guess would probably be, oh, well, surely it'll be the Lakehouse that I need to go to manage the data set. Nope, not there either. You need to go via the SQL endpoint. So if you load the SQL endpoint, it's going to give you a preview of the data that is available in your lake. And you've got a few different buttons across the top. Few things you can do. So this is the preview of the data in the data view. We can there's a model view across the bottom, which is going to show the default data set. So this has all been automatically generated. If we click onto, say, our calendar table and we look in the advanced element, you can see down here in the storage mode that it is in DirectLake mode. So by default, that is what happens from a DirectLake dataset perspective.
Cool.
What you'll also see from this is that there are no relationships in those tables. There's nothing there that I can, it wouldn't work as a data set effectively. So if I come up to reporting, you've got an option here to manage your default data set. A few things you can do here, because you can choose which tables you actually want to include. So for example, we've got some like audit type tables that have been brought into the lake that we wouldn't want to have there. So we can confirm that. Also, when we're managing the default data set, we can start looking into creating our relationships, because we want to absolutely be able to get these things talking to each other. So I have got a fact table across here somewhere. Here we go. And I can start to build out relationships to my dimensions. So let's take my date key to my date key. I'm going to assume referential integrity, because that's going to help with inner joins when we're querying the lake. Set that up, and effectively you can work through this and start getting that up and running. You can also add measures. So on my fact table, let's add a measure in here. Yeah, got the right table. Got myself a nice measure here. And you can effectively start to build that out as a data set. You, from here as well, once that data set is ready and configurable, you can connect to it from Power BI Desktop if you like. The alternative to that is you can just create reports inside the service themselves. So this will connect directly to my lake, and I should be able to pull on my sales measure here. And because we had a, there we go, let's put in calendar date. There we go. So interestingly, that's probably because I don't think I actually saved it, did I? But yeah, you theoretically you set up the. In fact, I'll tell you what that is. That is because my relationship's going in the wrong direction. So give that a refresh now, and hopefully that will reflect cardinality. There we go. So we can see sales over time. So that's effectively one way to get yourself up and running with a data set in DirectLake mode. I find this editing in the service, for want of a better word, a bit janky. So there's things you can't really do. You can certainly start to hide tables. So I don't want things like these audit tables that have come in with my lake. So I can hide those there. It's good practice normally to do things like hiding your surrogate keys. So for this sort of channel dimension, I might want to hide that. But another sort of good practice that I tend to do with all my data models is things like giving everything friendly names. So currently this is pointing at tables and columns in a Lakehouse, and it's kind of using proper case, as it were. And I want to sort of start introducing more friendly names and things like that and putting spaces. And you can't do that here at all. Also, it gets a bit clunky in terms of the fact it brings in sort of some tables that you might not want and things like that. Now, you have an alternative to the default data set. So you can, from here, create a brand new one. So rather than being the default, we can create something new. We're going to call this our demo one, and let's use naming convention. And then we can just select which tables we want here. So, oh, here we go. Don't click the wrong bits. Always good advice. Yeah, so I'm just going to go with calendar, store sales, and I've got a blank measure table here that I like to use. So this should spin me up a brand new data set. I can leave out objects that I'm not interested in, and it's going to become just a little bit easier to manage.
Oh, yeah, I mean, makes absolute. I mean, the same way you would normally in Power BI, right? Anyway, you can just create whatever data sets you need.
Yeah, cool. So it's remembered the relationship I already defined in my master data set. Can play around with some of my elements here. I can again add my measures. So if I want to,
if you've set up a load of measures,
say again.
If you've set up a load of measures in your default data set and people are spinning out their own data sets on top of it, so not only is it going to bring in all the relationships and things you've set up, will they be able to bring in those measures as well as they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they're defined in the default data set, then as soon as you select those tables to create new data sets, they are going to be there by default. So it does give you that opportunity to be able to have that single source of truth, the sort of BI nirvana, and having that there. Cool. So absolutely. Let's add another measure in here as well. Let's do sum of store sales. So there's an opportunity to kind of customize these data sets too. If you are using that default data set, the only way to edit it is using the Power BI service. And as already noted, it can be quite limited. There's some things that are difficult to change. Now, at the beginning of the public preview, because these data sets are in effectively premium workspaces, that means you can connect them using the XML endpoint. And at the beginning of the public preview, that was only a read-only connection. So you can connect to it, You might want to say connect DAX Studio and do some DAX testing, or you could connect something like Tabular Editor and browse the model at least, but you couldn't really do anything beyond that. And then a couple of months ago now, Microsoft have enabled write access on that XML endpoint. So what you can do as an alternative to doing this in the service, not for the default data set, but for any data set you create on top of that, you can use Tabular Editor instead. And that comes with a few really good advantages. So I'm just going to make sure I save that data set first. Oh, not the more button. Yeah, permanently and automatically saved, so I don't have to worry about saving it there. But if I come over to Tabular Editor, I can open up from my workspace. And I should see my default data set will still be listed. But also that new data set that I've created here. So I've got our Contoso demo data set. Yeah, let's save those. Oh. This is a very, very smooth demo, Simon.
Don't worry, if it was me using Tabular Editor, it'd be a much worse demo.
So we're live connected to a model here, so we can, for example, see the tables that I brought through. We can see here's the quantity measure that I did. I've got the sales measure here. I actually don't really want my sales measure in my sales table. I prefer it to be in my measures table instead, so I can pick that up and drag it, and I've redone it. I can do much better things, like I can change the names of stuff. So if I want to rename this, where is my rename button? There we go. So stick a space in there because it presents much nicer. We can actually do that. Ooh. In theory. Again, another smooth little transition. And yeah, it just gives you more options in terms of being able to make changes. I can save this back to my model. And we should now, if I go back to here and refresh my screen, we should see that those changes have been reflected.
No.
Now, here's the gotcha. As soon as you make any edits in the XML endpoint, you can no longer load your data set in the service. So once you've done that, kind of all bets are off. What you will be able to see though is, if I come up here, yeah, here we go. So you can see the changes there. You can still browse the model in the service. You just can't make edits. So you just need to remember that if you've done it with the XML endpoint. Now, that kind of spinning it up in the service and then going and editing it in Tabular Editor can be a bit of a clunky experience. What you absolutely can do if you want is you can create a new model here. And the folks at Tabular Editor have now enabled this so that you can just build it from scratch using Tabular Editor. So if I want to import tables here and use some implicit sources, and you'll see that Fabric OneLake is absolutely an option. So I don't have to do my development in one place, then fire up Tabular Editor to make any edits that I want. It can just be there straight away. That means you can get into the realms of source controlling that using Git, things like that as well, which is all good. And then just for good measure, I have created Blue Peter Styley, a fully made model here. So this fully made model has got loads and loads of measures in it, and it's all sorted out into folders because that's what you can do in Tabular Editor. And I've done best practices like marking up my date table and hiding my fact tables and all that kind of good stuff. And if I come over to deploy, I've already looked into the correct workspace and give this a new data set name. And fingers crossed, this is going to magically appear. Here we go, Contoso dataset. So just check. Yep, that deployed all okay. And again, we can, from here now, into the realms of let's auto create a report. This will be horrible. Please don't shoot me for the amazing data visualization this is about to produce.
It's fine. Having terribly made Power BI is kind of a theme of this channel. If I'm involved. Okay, so you kind of see there's a basic workflow where you can set up the absolute basics on your default data set just to get people started and kind of make it repeatable for people. And if someone wants to do something really simple, they can just spawn off a new data set from it in the service, but there's limited amounts you can do in terms of some of the pro dev stuff. And if you want to get really into the stuff, you can open it by something like Tabular Editor, where you can then just apply a lot more advanced like development discipline, development practices, source control, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from an interaction perspective now, this will run nice and quick and still pretty snappy in terms of being able to send those queries directly down to the lake. And yeah, you're up and running.
Cool. Very cool. And there's nothing in there that's, in terms of the design of your model and things, that's going to stop it from being DirectLake. That is just, you set it up as DirectLake and it's DirectLake.
So this is where it gets into the classic, it depends consultant answers. There are absolutely some issues and limitations in terms of being able to use it. So firstly, it is still in preview. I had a bit of a grumble on social media the other day about some of these limitations, and Alex Powers, who's in the Fabric cat team, was like, whoa, it's in preview, hold your horses, wait till we get to general availability, which sounds promising in terms of some of these limitations being lifted. But yeah, some things that you do need to bear in mind. So first of all, even though by default you'll look at the properties on that and it'll say, yes, this is a DirectLake table, if there are various conditions where what will happen is actually it won't use DirectLake. It'll potentially default back to using direct query instead, which becomes, if you're using some of the DAX functions that aren't supported, that can get a bit awkward because all of a sudden your DirectLake query that was using DAX that worked fine one day all of a sudden won't work because it's trying to do it in direct query. It is primarily around the data set size. So it's one of those where like people will tend to use direct query when they're dealing with larger volumes of data, because to try and pull that into import mode isn't practical. But ironically, it's the bigger your data set gets, then if it hits certain limits, it will fall back to direct query instead. Annoyingly, those limits aren't particularly explicitly defined, and Microsoft themselves also said that during the public preview they're likely to change, but you just have to be aware of that. You can kind of check it out using things like Performance Analyzer in Power BI. So when you use Performance Analyzer, you can tell whether or not it used DirectLake or it used direct query, but it's potentially difficult to guard against. There's a whole host of other weird things that you have to bear in mind. So if you have a view in your lake, you can bring your view into your data set, not a problem. But in actual fact, it won't actually query it using DirectLake. It'll query it using direct query again. That's to do with the fact that it needs to use the SQL endpoint to do it. It requires the SQL engine. So it doesn't basically let you use DirectLake on views. Kind of historically, we've tended to surface up our tables to Power BI using views so that we can do things like remove audit columns. So yeah, not going to be able to do that. This idea, you can't have mixed modes at the moment. So one of the good practices with direct query has always been sort of keep direct query on your large fact tables, but put your dimensions in what they call dual mode, whereby it has both a direct query and an import on the same table. And that means that when you're doing queries against the import mode for something like dimensions, it's nice and quick and snappy. But then when it needs to run a query against the fact table, it uses the direct query for the dimension as well. You can't have mixed modes in this. It can only be it's all DirectLake or not DirectLake. Things like calculated columns and calculated tables and field parameters aren't currently in there. This one's a big one for me. Date time relationships are not supported in DirectLake datasets. So one of the practices that I've always used is for my relationships between fact tables and date tables to be using date time fields. It's one of the best practices that the likes of Marco and Alberto advocate for. They've written loads of stuff on why that's a good idea. You can't do it here, so you need to sort of fall back to doing the good old fashioned smart date key type pattern in terms of creating those relationships. Some of the column types aren't supported. So again, people always talked about in Power BI sort of using things like GUIDs to join on isn't a great idea. It's not supported here anyway. There's also things like implicit data conversion for relationships. You could theoretically have had two tables related on a field where technically the fields are different data types, and it just does an implicit conversion. Doesn't do that now either. Yeah, so there's a whole host of bits and bobs that you just got to keep a lookout for. Really, you've just got to be wary of those. Certainly, the first DirectLake data set that I built, I was like, this isn't working properly. Why not? And it was like, oh, hang on a minute, I've not read the docs. Classic. And yeah, it came back and bit me in the behind slightly, so I had to rework it just to take into account some of these limitations.
So most of the time when you're designing a data set and if you hit one of these limitations, it'll be fairly obvious that you're then like falling out of it. But there's still some things where if you had something that was working in DirectLake and then someone made a change and they added a measure of a certain type, or they added a new table that was actually a view, there's some things people could do that would then drop it out, and you'll see the performance just basically fall off a cliff as it goes from DirectLake into Direct Query.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, it doesn't ruin the entire model. If you pull in that, if you did pull in a view, it would only fall back to your Direct Query when it needs to reference that view as part of it. It's kind of mix and match. And I would say, from my experience so far, you do something that breaks one of these limitations, it doesn't actually tell you. It's very much a case of everything looks like it's working, and it's only when you investigate under the hood that you realize that it's stopped using DirectLake now and it's fallen back to Direct Query. So just got something to be wary of.
Cool. I mean, again, as long as people are aware of that, if they suddenly find a performance problem, that's the thing to check out, right? It's probably switched modes. It's now probably using Direct Query for something that you've done, or even maybe the data volumes have changed and you've now suddenly hit a limitation, which is going to be fairly tricky to see. And we're hoping that'll be a lot more documented and clear and very crystal once we hit GA and we can get started this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Anything else anyone should know about DirectLake if they're going to get started with it?
Nothing in particular springs to mind. I guess the secret sauce that kind of enables this is something called V-ordering, which is like we talk about Z-order in Databricks land all the time, and you can Z-order in Fabric as well, as far as I'm aware. But V-ordering is their own sort of proprietary ordering algorithm, which is designed to basically make the Vertipack engine work even quicker. So again, just something to bear in mind if you're looking at hybrid patterns with Fabric. So we've been exploring continuing to use Databricks for our actual engineering workload, but just landing the Delta tables into Fabric so that we can use DirectLake on top of that data. Just have to bear in mind that on some larger data sets, because you can't apply that V-ordering using Databricks, it might not be quite as snappy. But again, it also depends on the data volumes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if the Delta has been written using Fabric, it's more likely to be optimized for it, and you'll find it going faster currently.
Absolutely.
Just makes sense. All right, cool. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Johnny, and we'll be dragging you back to talk more about the Power BI in the new realm of Fabric as it kind of expands and we see more stuff. But yeah, thanks for joining us.
No worries.
All right, so that is DirectLake. That is this new ability of Power BI to read data directly from a Delta table held within a lake, in one lake inside a Fabric. Again, that could be Delta that you've got in another lake and you've shortcutted it. Just one lake needs to be able to see it. But if you are within those limitations, if you're doing things right, again, you should see performance is actually surprisingly quick and removes a load of limitations that you'd have with import mode and incremental loads and all those kind of things. And we're hoping when it gets to GA, it's just going to be essentially the default way of working, the default way we actually do things, because it just simplifies so much of what we have done previously in terms of juggling data around and trying to get it into the system and all that good stuff. So, yeah, let us know what you think. Have a go, try and use it. If you're on the Fabric preview currently, go and try it out. Put your mode as DirectLake, get some data into OneLake, and just, yeah, try and build a model, see how you get on. Let us know in the comments how you go. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll be back around with more Fabric info soon. Cheers.